From the Oklahoman newsroom, you're watching the Press Row. I'm Jenni Carlson here with Barry Tramel. Barry, Wednesday night, the LA Clippers come to town to play the Thunder, and the last time these two teams met was really a confirmation of these late game struggles that the Thunder has now, we've seen several times. How important is this game for the Thunder, not only in regards to that, but the standings? This is a pretty big standings game too.
Well, I mean, you never want to overemphasize any regular season game in the NBA, but this is a huge game for a lot of reasons, most of them mental. Yeah. I mean, the meltdown in Los Angeles last week was at least on the short list of the worst losses in Thunder history. To have a 22-point lead, to have a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter, to give it away that late in the game and lose to one of your big rivals has to cast doubts and all kinds of questions on a team. And now the Clippers are back in Oklahoma City. How will the Thunder respond? The Clippers are only a game and a half out in the standings behind Oklahoma City. This has huge ramifications, mostly mental. If Oklahoma City can come out and play like it did in LA and dominate the Clippers, only this time step on the gas and instead of taking the foot off, then all of a sudden you've reasserted yourself as a superior team. But losing to the Clippers, to me, that would be a very, very bad sign. Yeah,
and again, it is a situation where the Thunder and the Clippers are in very close proximity in the standings, and if you fall to that 4 spot, you're looking at a second-round matchup with the Warriors. There's just no getting around it when it comes to that being your matchup in the second round if you're the Thunder, because Warriors are not relinquishing that spot. So you want to continue to make sure that you're the solid 3, so at least you wait until the Western Conference Finals to play the Warriors. So I think that's important too. But, clearly, Barry, you mentioned just the meltdown, but then you take out the fact that, Blake Griffin's not on the floor for that game. This is not a defensive team at all in the Clippers, and yet the Thunder not finding ways to score any points down the stretch. But you talk about not having those meltdowns. We've seen more of those since then. This has now become a trend for this team. You keep thinking they're going to break out of it, but I don't know if it's a great time to go against a team that you really need to beat and try to break that trend.
It's a lack of focus, a lack of concentration. You keep thinking they'll rediscover it. They will focus. They will concentrate. But we saw it in Milwaukee. I mean, they just dominate Milwaukee, and then all of a sudden, late third quarter, just falls apart again. The Bucks early fourth quarter cut the lead to 2 points in a game in which the Thunder led by 20 most of the game. So they've got to work on this. They've got a great team. They've got great talent. They're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NBA. But when they have those missteps, not only does it cost them games, but it costs them confidence and it weighs on them mentally, and that will cost them in the spring.
Well, we talked about this early in the year, when they were having trouble down the stretch, and we thought, well, they'll get it figured out. Here we are again. They're still trying to get it figured out. You're watching the Press Row. I'm Jenni here with Barry. Barry, we're going to go from one really good basketball team that happens to be struggling to another really good basketball team that happens to be struggling. This one being the Oklahoma Sooners. They head up to the Big 12 tournament, as does Oklahoma State. Games start Wednesday and then finish up with the championship on Saturday. What is important in your mind for Oklahoma in this tournament? They're opening with Iowa State. There's a chance they're going to play a pretty good NCAA tournament team every step of the way if they make the finals.
Well, this OU basketball team, they've had a great season. Let's not get too worked up. They're going to be a number 2 seed unless they win out. They might be a number 1 seed. But it's mystifying how a team this experienced, a team with this many good guards, a team that started 4 guys coming up on 100 games in a row, can play sort of the haphazard style that they played the last few games with total disregard of the ball, not treasuring possessions, committing silly turnovers. That's not indicative of a senior-laden veteran team. It's sort of,
and they're guards too, Barry. When you look at those turnovers, they're guards turning over the ball.
It's people that have handled the ball for year after year in tough situations. It's a total mystery. I don't know what's going to happen. It's unlikely that a team makes a huge change. However, we have seen some teams go to Kansas City, sort of gel, use this week in Kansas City to sort of refortify, go into the NCAA tournament and play well. I'm thinking of Eddie Sutton's 95 Final Four team. They, the Big Country's team, they were a good, solid team, but they weren't great necessarily throughout the entire regular season. They go to Kansas City, find themselves, play well, make a Final Four run. Yeah. This Oklahoma team is completely capable of that, but they've got to take care of the ball.
Well, and you wonder if the Big 12 might be a setup where they really do have to focus in on themselves, because they're going to open with Iowa State, then there's a strong likelihood they play against West Virginia in the second round, and then that finals, in all likelihood, we'll put Kansas there as the top seed. You got to think that Kansas has a great chance to get there. So that means, Barry, every step of the way, you're going to play in a tough mental environment. Iowa State always brings tons of fans to Kansas City, so that place will be rocking for Iowa State. Then West Virginia, the style that they play, that really puts that pressure on you to be so sharp that you have to value every moment, every pass, every movement. And then obviously Kansas, if that's the final, you're again talking about a house packed in opposition, so you really have to rally around. Maybe that's that mental sharpness that they need, because we've seen them struggle as much at home as anywhere, Barry. Right. I mean, saw them struggle mightily against Baylor, just ran out to a huge lead and then had to hold on at the end. So maybe that gets them refocused, because like you mentioned, I think they've got still a good chance to get a 1 seed if they play well this weekend, and that would be huge.
Yeah, it would be. And, your point about the home and road is exactly right. They played better in Morgantown than they did in Norman against West Virginia. They played better in Waco than they did in Norman against Baylor. So it's they played better in Lawrence against Kansas than they did in Norman against Kansas. So that's good for a team, but you still want this team to just sort of recalibrate. And remember that the ball is to be treasured, and you can't give it away. And the way that you get Buddy Hield shots, and you get Isaiah Cousins shots, and Jordan Woodard shots, is to not turn it over.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I mentioned that 1 seed. That's not a must in my mind, because there's just so much parity in college basketball this year. The difference between 1 and 2 some years is pretty big. I'm not sure it's as big this year, but psychologically, that'd be huge to see Oklahoma on a 1 line. You're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenny here with Barry, and even though there's a lot of basketball to talk about and digest, Barry, spring football is underway, and obviously some big-time storylines with the quarterbacks at both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph, we know they're the starters, but what's important at OU in your mind?
Well, at OU, I mean, there's a dearth of quarterbacks. Kyler Murray's on campus, but he's ineligible, so he'll just be getting ready for the 2017 season. That means Bob Stoops has to cultivate a true freshman quarterback to be the backup. Austin Kendall from North Carolina, great prospect, but it's a little bit precarious counting on a guy who's not even gone to his senior prom yet, and that's where the Sooners are right now with the backup quarterback. Now, they do have a good model. This is exactly what happened at Baylor last year. But Jarrett Stidham came in as an early enrollee in January, became the Baylor backup. Come fall, Seth Russell gets hurt. Midway through the year, Jarrett Stidham comes on and plays very well and was an excellent fill-in. Ended up showing the signs that, hey, Baylor quarterbacking is going to be in good shape. That's what Oklahoma needs out of Austin Kendall.
Yeah, big spring for Austin Kendall. This is going to be his chance to really get some reps and some snaps. Because this is where he can start to build that rapport that then carries over into the summer. But I think it's interesting. We're not going to see him this spring. Cody Thomas deciding to go play baseball. But when I talked to him when baseball opened practice, he said he had not closed the door on going back to football. Now, obviously, that would leave him behind, Barry. He wouldn't have this spring to be practicing. But you know what? At the end of the baseball season, if he decides he wants to go back, he could have the summer. He was that backup guy when last year ended. I don't know how that factors in. I don't have any great knowledge as to whether he's leaning that way to go back or not go back. I think a lot depends on this baseball season. But that's another factor that we'll have to continue to watch just in terms of bodies, because right now they're just really thin on bodies. They don't have a lot of options beyond those top 2 guys that we know have eligibility except for walk-ons. Oklahoma State kind of in a similar situation, Barry, although slightly different, because they're kind of looking for J.W. Walsh 2.0, aren't they?
Yeah, and Cowboys, they have John Kolar was here last year as a freshman, so he's at least a year ahead of where Austin Kendall is. Taylor Cornelius is a walk-on that they really like, so that's sort of the guys vying for the backup quarterback situation. But you do have that Walsh package as sort of the outlier. Oklahoma State had such success with J.W. Walsh coming in as a short yardage quarterback and as a change of pace quarterback. Now, the truth of the matter is that worked really well, not because it was an interesting development or an interesting scheme. It worked because J.W. Walsh was quarterbacking it.
Yeah.
I don't know if Oklahoma State can find somebody like J.W. Walsh, a guy who is a veteran thrower and a savvy runner that doesn't necessarily fit the profiles of Kolar or Cornelius. But it's something, if this OSU running game doesn't get better, which maybe it will, maybe it won't, but if it doesn't get better, you've got to find ways to make short yardage and run the ball. That's what J.W. Walsh provided. That's sort of the dilemma that Mike Gundy finds himself this spring. If they don't get the running game going, will they have to look to a quarterback alternative to try to spark things?
Yeah, and what you said about J.W. Walsh is so right, because you think about the success, the percentage of times he ran the ball or was in the game and either got first downs or scored. I mean, it's unbelievable just the success rate when he was on the field. And you've written in the past, and we've talked in the past about Trevor Knight not having that great running instinct.
Right.
J.W. Walsh is the exact opposite. Here's a guy that the ball snapped, everything changes in front of you, and he just had a way to find a spot to run through, make yards, sometimes get in the end zone. I'm not sure that we can assume that there's anybody on campus or anybody in the state right now that has instincts like that. So that's going to be hard to grow. But it's interesting. We're gonna have a lot to watch in the quarterbacks, which, when you've got your starters set, you think, well, everything's figured out. Nope. Quarterback drama this spring. We'll see how it goes as those teams really get cracking. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.